Welcome you all to this fourth lecture of the 11th week related to History of Arabic Literature as course title. We'll be discussing certain aspects of modern and postmodern literary criticism as as the school has emerged in Arabic literary circles. So, if we just recollect the historical trajectory related to critical enterprise, critical discourse, literary critical discourse in Arabic, we would be correlating certain aspects, historical aspects, a historical trajectory, which I would draw as a line starting from the earliest recorded phase of Arabic language and literature with the literary and critical consciousness, because language as such, when it is standard, it assumes the stage of the degree of standard maturity and standard. Then it cannot be separated from the critical aspects, aspects of criticism, or the very consciousness, the primary substances of the primary thought infrastructure, thought contents, guiding the persons, whether they are the creators, the writers, the poets, or the listeners, the receiving, the receptive end. There must be that substance of appreciation based on certain merits, certain standards. These merits, these standards, these merits, these standards actually constitute a level of critical awareness, a critical maturity, which might not be well codified, standardized at the first stage, because in every language, in the histories of all the languages of the world and their literary enterprises, literary history of all the languages of the world, the stages of codification, penning down, writing down, recording the material, the corpus, the thoughts, the schools of thought, the persons, the books, all the compendiums, etc. These stages actually come later on. So, this is again true in regard to Arabic language and literature in the as in the perspectives of the literary critical discourse. So, from the pre-Islamic period, then early Islamic period, the trajectory continues. Then the Umayyad period, the Abbasid period, the Renaissance period, the modern period, and now the postmodern period. So, this can be the historical trajectory. Not to enter into much details or recall deeper details, because we have seen all these things. And this first stage, the critical awareness was present in all these stages, as it is simply something of the nature of the evolution of a language, and each and everything related to the evolution of language and literature, the parameters of literature, literary discourse, critical discourse, etc. But in the first stage, then the pre-Islamic period, then the early Islamic and early Islamic period, sometimes Umayyad period is taken as an extension of the Islamic period. Then Umayyad period, Abbasid period, Renaissance period, and modern period, modern and postmodern periods. It was only during the Abbasid period, if we just separate from, if we see the Umayyad period to be different from the early Islamic period, not simply an extension of this, if we classify them into separate lines. Then it was only during the Abbasid times that there have been some, like outreach, external influences. There have been the dialogues, the interactions, the interactive domain taking place between the literary and critical discourse in Arabic uh, and the an external discourse, literature, literary enterprise, literary standards, critical standards that came to into they came into contact with this Arab counterpart in the backdrop of the Abbasid translations during the times of chiefly Mamun and others under his patronage in Baitul Hikman, either on individual capacities or on the institutional level. When books of Greek philosophers, scientists, uh, and manipulators, chiefly theorists such as Aristotle, because they were actually the encyclopedic figure. So we cannot simply say that he was a physician or a philosopher or a theorist related to a specific domain of knowledge. Rather, they were the encyclopedic persons. This is especially true in regard to Aristotle and, of course, others. Aristotle is a point of reference in this sequence because it was for the first time in the history of Arabic literature that the external discourses on language and literature, like poetry and prose, rhetoric, Kitab al-Shi'r, Poetica of Aristotle, and Kitab al-Khataba, Rhetorica of Aristotle, were translated into Arabic. And they had contributed tremendously to formation of a school, a new school that entered into dialogue with the early school or schools of Arabia in literary criticism, in the rhetoric, in balagha, in etymological studies, language sciences, because there were no well-defined points of departure as regards the evolution of the concept of sciences or the very corpus of science, the cognitive of the human beings. So things were not well defined as to say that this specific branch of knowledge is different from quite different. It's altogether different from other branches of knowledge also. So here we find that Aristotle's theory of poetics, how poetry is composed, the functions of poetry, the role played by poetry in the domain of aesthetics, chiefly, and the social role played chiefly this his idea of the catharsis. So this way we'll finding that the rhyming patterns, the very concept of rhythm, the harmony, aspects of harmony, in choice of words, etc. And again, questions like questions of whether a poet always speaks truth, the questions of truth and untruth in poetry. Because of this, we have seen that Plato had exiled poets from his Jamhuriya, from his republic. So the ideas of Aristotle, as in Poetica, it was these ideas were assimilated for the first time in history of Arabic language and literature. So here we'll be finding the emergence. We'll be finding that a new school emerges, which is represented by a number of critics, whether it is Qudama bin Ja'far, Ibn Rashiq al-Qairwani, or the others, Hazm al-Qartashini, alongside some other philosophers whose fame, whose position in the literary circles, in the academia, in the Arab academia, rested so primarily or chiefly on some specific lines, such as science or medicine, but they have again they have contributed tremendously to the domain of poetic studies, critical studies, etc. So this was for the first time. So this background of the external elements, external inputs, we won't be calling it element, rather inputs, the external contents of thought and the theories were incorporated with the Arab paradigm of literary enterprise and critical discourse. After that, we know, we can recollect the things of decay, the things, all these things, decades of some centuries of decay, decadence, where language and literary discourse were not, they didn't flourish in some era of a purity of a language, beauty, original beauty rather. They rested because of weaknesses creeping into the domain of literary craftsmanship on many fronts, the philological front, the stylistics front, the scansion front, the front of the scansion system, the medical arrangement, etc. And the overall decay in the thought content during the days of the decadence after the destruction of Baghdad, as it must be recalled, it should be kept in mind as something very significant, because that actually interprets many factors and chief factors related to the phenomena, this stage of decadence in Arabic society, and that is reflected in the domain of language and literature. Things continued as we have seen till the Ottoman periods, because of some other factors like related to language, the first language and the second language of the state, of the rulers, of course, and the public at large. And after that, we have that the East enters into a dialogue with the West. The East comes into interaction with the West, which I'll be using al-ihtikak bayna ashraq wal-gharb in the backdrop of Napoleon Bonaparte's invasion. The reform, and the second stage, reforms carried out by Muhammad Ali Pasha and Rifa Bek Tahtawi and others, leading to the emergence of the first generation of the reformists, first generation of the reformists, and the emergence of a generation that believed in neoclassicism. They formed a section that that is known as the neoclassist thinkers and poets, forming new classicism in the domain of literary discourse. This new classicism was we won't be saying de-seated or blocked or given a deadly blow by the modernist, but the modernist was there. After that, we have the modernism. Modernism welcoming the ideas, the parameters, the paradigms, the new thought, the concept of literature, and what should be done in literature, what literature should be representative of in terms of the language, the language aspects as well as the content aspect, and the role that is assigned to language and literature, literary discourse in relation to society, in society itself. So at this stage, you'll be finding that for the second time, the first time was the Abbasid period, and for the second time, the East enters into a dialogue with the West, where the critical discourse of the literary discourse of East Arabic, of course, here we're focusing, we're confining ourselves to Arabic. It came into contact with, and where for the second time, the ideas of modern Europe were disseminated, integrated at some extent with the Eastern paradigm, Arab paradigm of language and literature. So here we will be saying, differentiating between the first phase and the second phase, that the first phase was primarily the Greek phase, having the influence of the Greek philosophers, the Greek theorists, chiefly Aristotle. At the second stage, we'll be finding that, and again, that the first stage was assimilated within the Arab discourse via Syriac, so the Syriac elements were there. But again, these formed the Hellenistic aspect, the Hellenistic phase, is known as the Hellenistic phase. Now, the difference between this phase and another phase that we are dealing with, that is the second gate, the second phase. It is related to modern Europe with all the concept, the background, industrial revolution and socialist revolutions, the modern Europe after Renaissance, emerging after Renaissance, the emergence of new concept of language and literature, literary discourse, poetry in service of society, etc. Then different schools, starting from neoclassicism to romanticism, then social realism, etc. Emergence of modern novel and modern poetry, blank verse, etc. So this stage, second stage is was far more powerful or far more rich. It is richer than the first stage we are having. The first stage was related to some specific domain of language and literature and poetry, the philosophy of poetry, the role assigned to poetry in the social milieu. But in the second phase, we'll be having a plethora of things, concepts, ideas, paradigms, genre emerging, amid many other things which assisted, which contributed to the promotion of development of expanding expanding the spaces of language and literature and literary discourse, like journalism and the printing press, establishment of press, journalism, etc. Along with some other facets, other emerging literary genre like drama, and how it was integrated within the social fabric of socio intellectual literary fabric of society, whether it was in East or West. So this way we can say that this second phase was far more powerful. Now the things continued, the saga continues, the trajectory continues, and we enter into the postmodern period. The postmodernism in the backdrop of emerging ideas in Russia, in wake of the emergence of structuralism, which is known in Arabic as Albaniawiyya, structuralism, Albaniawiyya. Albaniaviyya Rus, the Russian structuralists, and who are related to their contemporaries and the next generation of the theorists in the domain of language and literature in proper Europe. And here we'll finding that structuralism gets connected with the post-structural saga, post-structural phenomenon. So here we'll be finding that here we enter into the contemporary phase, the postmodern phase. That is very much like the early part of the contemporary phase, contemporary world. And because if you are talking about the present as such, the present moment, so it is the moment of the postmodern phase, postmodern period. So and the postmodern period has so many other things, greater avenues of thoughts and paradigms, like post-truth, the concept of post-truth, for example, we'll be talking about that, and other theories related to some, like the terminologies, the concept of terminology, etc., and meta language theory, etc. So it's only at this latest phase, or the fourth phase of postmodernism, that we find that these new emerging ideas, theories are seated within the empyrean of language, of Arabic literary discourse. So in this phase, actually, that is the postmodern phase. In this phase, we'll be having in the domain of literary discourse and critical discourse, the discourse of criticism. We'll be finding all these postmodern ideas, whether they are related to the argumentative theory or the pragmatic theory, the semiotics theory, etc. They are, and deconstruction, the death of author, the concept of the theory of the death of author, the deconstruction theory. So we'll be finding that these are assimilated in this new discourse. This Nidus course in Arabic is represented by a number of critics, very noted critics. Among them, we'll be having, well, again, before we proceed further, we'll be discussing one thing very significant in this regard. What it is primarily, in a nutshell, in the substance, what it is that demarcates the modern theories, distinguishes the modern theories, modern paradigm of language and literature from the post-modern, modern and postmodern, and of course postmodern, which is the latest phase. So here, there is one thing I usually analyze this phenomenon and infer the results as we must see that what was the usual classification of the sciences, the classical classification of the sciences, or the traditional classification of the sciences. First, it is like the sciences, the domain of sciences, then the domain of social sciences, and the domain of humanities, means literature, because social sciences are sometimes part of the humanities. So we'll be calling the literature, the language studies related to language. So we'll be having these primarily these three segments that are different from each other, both in terms of the methodology, which is to be applied for any academic deliberation on these themes. So scientific methodology as different from the social sciences methodology applied in social sciences, and third, the methodology applied in the domain of literature, language and literature. So in Arabic it's al-ulum al-ijtama'iyya. First it is al-ulum, the second is al-ulum al-ijtama'iyya, and the third is al-adab, al-lughat wal-adab. And the differences were well defined: scientific method, scientific content and method of social sciences, and content and method that are related to literature, language and literature. And these contents, these methods were quite visible, distinguished from the other methods. They were very much like exclusivist. They practically they believed in what they practiced was exclusivism, not inclusivism, of course. So where the points of difference were far more important than the points of assimilation or the meeting. So in very simple terms, sciences were different from the social sciences, and social sciences, and both were different from the arts, from the domain of arts and languages. But in critical discourse in modern times, critical analysis in modern times, especially in the backdrop of the emergence of new ideas, like these theories, the postmodern theories of the pragmatic theory, the semiotic theory, the argumentative theory, etc., the deconstruction theory of deconstruction. All these theories have, in the ultimate analysis as regards the outcome, actual outcome, we'll be finding that, I emphasize on this point, we'll be finding that the analysis, the study and analysis of literature, language and literature, sometimes assumes the character of science, or social science at least, sometimes like science. Means here the aspect, the methodology, if you talk in terms of methodology, finding that the quantitative study, the quantitative aspect, the quantitative method is far more important, visible in the backdrop of these episodes, these developments. So here analysis of language on pure scientific standards, that are in use, of course, in the domain of language sciences, linguistic sciences. That is the not simply the theoretical studies, rather practical. The establishment of language labs, laboratories for language, for the study of the words, study and the phonetics especially, and this especially in regard to the study of like scansion system, aruz, qawafi, because the study of aruz and qawafi on pure lines related to like a sound measurement, sound segments, rhyming patterns, will be having this. So this is something new, and this actually makes the literary discourse, the critical standards applied in the domain of language and of literature, study of language and literature, assuming the character of semi-sciences. So that's why this is important. يعني هذه النقطة في الحقيقة هي نقطة مهمة، لأنكم عندما ترون، عندما نرى أن يعني هناك هذه المناهج، هذا التقسيم العادي، التقسيم التقليدي للعلوم والفنون، أن هناك العلوم، هناك القطاع العلمي، العلوم، الفيزياء، الكيمياء، الرياضيات وغيرها، هي التي مبنية على تجريب، هي مؤسسة على التجريب، المنحى التطبيقي فيها واضح كبير معلوم، وهذا شيء مؤسس يعني أصبح يعني وفق المعايير العلمية. وأن العلوم مثلا تفترق عن العلوم الاجتماعية، فهناك الفرق بين العلوم التطبيقية والعلوم الاجتماعية، وأن العلوم التطبيقية والعلوم الاجتماعية تختلفان عن الآداب، اللغات والآداب، والمناهج الدراسة، مناهج الدراسة والتحليل التي كانت تطبق على اللغات وعلى الدراسات اللغوية والدراسات الأدبية هي كانت مختلفة عن المناهج التي يستخدمونها في العلوم الاجتماعية. ولكن في سياق هذه الأحداث الأخيرة، في خضم ما بعد الحداثة ونظريات ما بعد الحداثية، مثل التداولية pragmatism، والحجاجية the argumentative theory، والسيموتيقية the semiotic challenge semiotic theory وغيرها، موت المؤلف، نعم، ويعني التفكيكية deconstruction وما إليها. في هذا السياق نجد أن المعايير للتحليل، للدراسة والتحليل، الأدب، النصوص الأدبية، النصوص اللغوية، أصبحت قريبة إلى المناهج التي نراها في العلوم الاجتماعية، بل إلى العلوم في ساحة العلوم، مثل الدراسات الصوتية، ويعني استخدام المنهج الكمي في سياقات شتى على النصوص، على مادة هي مادة أدبية، مادة لغوية ومادة أدبية. يعني بهذا نجد أن الكفتين في سياق الأثر الذي كان في القرون الوسطى مقارنة مع الأثر الأوروبي، الأثر اليوناني في القرون الوسطى، مقارنة مع الأثر الأوروبي الحديث في العصر الحاضر، يعني أصبحت تتأرجحان، الكفتان تتأرجحان. يعني الأثر آنذاك لم يكن واسعا، بينما يعني كان في الحقيقة مختصرا، مقتضبا، مركزا على معالجة النصوص الشعرية مثلا، خاصة الشعرية، والخطاب إنها لم تتعدى المجالات الأخرى. بينما نرى أن النظريات الحديثة، النظريات السيموتيقية والتداولية والحجاجية وغيرها، وهي حديثة معاصرة، هي يعني أثرت كثيرا على المشهد التنظيري، على مدارس التنظير، على المشهد الأدبي والنقدي المعاصر. في هذا السياق نجد أن الفرق بينهما كبير. طيب، لنذهب إلى نتقدم إلى الأمام ونعالج القضايا الأخرى. ففي هذا السياق في الحقيقة نحن نتحدث عن بعض الشخصيات التي لها قامتها الهامة المهمة جدا الآن على المشهد الأدبي والنقدي. In this sequence, we have entered into, we'll be just talking about some very prominent persons related to the postmodern scenario of literary as well as critical discourse. So أدونيس very prominent figure. مقدمة للشعر العربي written by him. خطوة نحو أدونيس، زمن الشعر، الثابت والمتحول، الأصول، تأصيل الوصول، صدمة الحداثة. الأصول وتأصيل الوصول، صدمة الحداثة. These are three very significant, very prominent books written by him. Alongside سياسة الشعر، فاتحة لنهاية القرن، كلام البدايات، الكتاب أمس، المكان الآن، وغيرها. Alongside these, so we'll be having all these books written by him. So has been the Arab ambassador in UNESCO, that is representing Arabic circles of language, of literature. The second very prominent figure is Kamal Abu Deeb. Kamal Abu Deeb. Kamal Abu Deeb is known for applying the postmodern techniques in the study of language, Arabic language and literature. So عذابات المتنبي في صحبة كمال أبو ديب والعكس بالعكس. This one very significant book written by Kamal Abu Deeb. جدلة الخفاء والتجلي, another very significant book. كتاب الرؤى المقنعة, الرؤى المقنعة, again very significant, written by Kamal Abu Deeb. عبد السلام المسدي, sometimes he is compared with the Taha Hussein. So Taha Hussein, who is known as the teacher of the generation, أستاذ الجيل. طه حسين هو الملقب بأستاذ الجيل. Likewise, Abdul Salam al-Musaddi from Tunisia holds a very, very prominent position in the domain of the postmodern literary discourse, the critical discourse. Both have been ministers of education during their lifetime. One was related to Egypt and another to Tunisia. Al-Musaddi is especially known for his many contributions, very significant contribution to the domain of the stylistics. In the domain of stylistics, we'll be finding a lot many books written by him. Like Al-Uslub al-Uslubiyya is the foremost book written by him in 1977. In this book, he focuses on the study of language in the parameters of language and literature in the parameters of stylistics. What is the stylistics, and what are the parameters, the theorizing, the ideas, the schools, etc. So when it comes to that domain of style and stylistics in literary enterprise, Al-Musaddi holds significant position. التفكير اللساني في الحضارة العربية, this book came in 1980. The linguistic discourse, the linguistic thought in Arab civilization, قراءة مع الشابي والمتنبي والجاحظ وابن خلدون, study of having a tete-a-tete of that is interaction, like some conversation with Abul Qasim Shabi, Mutanabbi, Jahiz ibn Khaldun, means conversation with their thoughts, with their paradigms, with their persona as it is represented in their books. Because Abul Qasim Shabi, a modern poet, Mutanabbi, of course, a poet related to the Middle Ages, Jahiz ibn Khaldun, again, Middle Ages. النقد والحداثة, قاموس اللسانيات, الشرط في القرآن على نهج اللسانيات الوصفية, اللسانيات من خلال النصوص, اللسانيات وأسسها المعرفية, مراجع اللسانيات, مراجع النقد الحديث, قضية البنيوية, the issue of structuralism, ما وراء اللغة, ما وراء اللغة, that is about the meta language, meta linguistic, في آليات النقد, etc. Alongside all these, العولمة والعولمة المضادة, globalization and counter globalization, السياسة وسلطة اللغة, politics and the authority of language, etc. العرب والانتحار اللغوي, Arabs and the linguistic suicide, linguistic suicide. الهوية العربية والأمن اللغوي. So المصطلح النقدي, في آلية النقد الأدبي. So these are very significant books. Abdurrahman Al-Haj Saleh, again very significant name. But I have on some occasions well, I visited Algeria. I had visited him in his office and we had a talk. And he had gifted to me all of his books that were present at the time. So he's among the very foremost linguists, scholars of language and linguistics in modern times. Written a large number of books. Abdurrahman Al-Haj Saleh. Abdul Qadir Al-Firi Al-Fasi, we have been together twice again in Algeria. Abdul Qadir Al-Firi Fasi. With all his books, all these books, حوار اللغة، السياسة اللغوية، اللسانات واللغة العربية، المعجم العربي، معجم المصطلحات اللسانية, etc. He's among the few Moroccan writers who have written in English as well as in Arabic. So primarily they write in Arabic. And of course, we'll be having a number of scholars writing in French. But we're in the French, because French happens to be the second language, rather sometimes it is the first language in terms of use, as the case is of English, like the case of English in the Indian subcontinent. So alongside many others like Muhammad Mandoor, Badwi Tawana, Jabir Osfour, Abdul Jalil Murtaz, Saeed bin Karad, Shukri Ayyad, Sharif Al-Jayyar, Salah Fadl. Salah Fadl, again known for his a large number of books related, very significant contribution to the domain of stylistics. Abdul Latif Mahfouz, Shuaib Halifi, Abu Shuaib As-Sawari, Mustafa Al-Nahal, Hassan Al-Muddon, Saeed Yaqteen, Muhammad Khrimash, Muhammad Mustafa Salim. We have been together on many occasions. Muhammad Khrimash and Muhammad Mustafa Salim. Badwi Tawana and his books, Jabir Osfour and his books, Salahuddin Abdul Sami Fadl Salah Fadl and his books, a large number of books written by him. Abdul Malik Murtaz, alongside Abdul Jalil Murtaz, Saeed Yaqteen, books written by him. Muhammad Khrimash, we have been together on some occasions. Edward Wadi' Saeed, Edward Saeed, إيهاب حسان تمام، اللغة العربية معناها ومبناها. This is one of the foremost books, so very prominent and significant books written in modern times. Mustafa Badawi. In Saudi, we have Sa'ad al-Baza'i, Sa'id al-Suraihi, Abid al-Khazandar, Abdul Fattah Abu Medin, Abdullah al-Fawzan, Abdullah al-Ghazami, very prominent name, Abdullah al-Ghazami, Abdullah Abdul Jabbar, Eid Na'im al-Sahwa, Fatima al-Qarani. Abdullah al-Ghazani is especially known for his contribution in the domain of the al-Naqd al-Thaqafi, or the cultural criticism, alongside some naqidat, that is the female critics like Suhair al-Qalamawi, with all her contributions. Salma Khadra al-Jayyusi with her writings and very significant contribution in this domain. So this actually brings to spotlight the tremendous literary and critical scenario of critical discourse evolving in Arabic, which adorns the international stage of literary craftsmanship and the critical discourse in modern times. With this, we are coming to an end to this lecture. Thank you.